Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
I got word that the Pentagon had been hit. And of course, Rob was working in the Pentagon. Immediately, like any spouse, picked up the phone, tried to call him to get a hold of him.
We just went into action. Probably 200 or so folks split up into 4 teams. I got on one of the teams and we started going back in. At that point is when I realized how many folks on the aircraft that we had lost. It was pretty devastating.
We huddled around the television set just like 90% of Americans did that day and prayed and kept trying to get through to Rob.
I wanted to get to my family as quick as possible and make sure they knew that I was still okay and that they were okay.
I will never forget him walking in the door, the look on his face, the smell that he had on his clothes is a smell I will never forget. It was tough. It was tough.
I was very proud of the way the folks that I was around reacted, and it didn't matter whether they were in uniform or out. And that's what Americans do. We go to the fight. We go to the sound of the guns, and we try to help.
September 11th, 2024, and Americans are supporting Islamist terrorists in our streets. Well, the Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. We will never forget. My family and every single American I ever worked with in my military career will never forget what happened on that day. We will always remember and honor the dead, the injured, and the destroyed families at the hands of these Islamist terrorists. As we watched the events happening in the streets today, almost a year beyond the worst atrocities on the Jewish people since World War II from October 7th, 23, we're absolutely appalled by the ignorance shown by young people in our streets supporting these war criminals. What is driving this illogical and unconscionable support for a government and terrorist force that committed such crimes against humanity? I believe a large part of what we're seeing is because of the feckless actions of the American government led by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris toward Israel's operations to eliminate Hamas from the face of the earth. They have emboldened our enemies from Afghanistan to the Middle East, to Eastern Europe and the Pacific, resulting in the Americans joining them and celebrating their victories over us in our own streets. Well, my guest today is the host of the David Pollock Show. David is an attorney and political consultant, commentator. He's worked on local, county, and federal races, most recently in the campaign of Corey Mills for U.S. Congress, and he won. He's also a broadcaster with a media production degree from Florida State University. David also holds a Juris Doctorate from Florida International University. He's served in government for more than a decade before running for local office himself in 2020, and he remains heavily involved in politics and the broadcasting space with his show. David, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Man, that's a long bio. You could have just said my good friend David Pollock from the Pollock Show. That would have been sufficient, but it's a good resume. I like it. Proud of it.
Yeah, it is a great resume. You're a smart guy, man. I look up to you.
Thanks. I look up to you. So we have mutual respect here. It's an honor to do your show today, sir.
Well, thank you very much. This day it's a tough day for me to do a show, but the show helps me and helps my family because with these things, folks, for those that have been through traumatic experience like we did on 9/11, the more you talk about it and think about it and discuss it with other people instead of just thinking about it yourself, the better off you are. And here we are 23 years later, and that video, that opening video, that was my wife in the video speaking most of the time there, and you can still hear it in her voice. That was 11 years after the after the incident, the attacks. What type of emotions get welled up in it? And before we dive too far into this thing, I just want to honor the dead again, and really honor the surviving families. They're always in our prayers. I have met many of them. There's a young man that was a Navy officer in the Navy command post that had just opened in that section of the Pentagon. His mom and dad are from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I met them a few years ago. And I also know U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Brian Birdwell from Texas, who was the working in the office that took the direct hit. The U.S. Army Chief of Personnel's General's office. He was one of his executive assistants, and he had gone to the latrine, to the bathroom. And most people, I don't know if you know, the Pentagon is constructed out of concrete. So all the floors, walls, and ceilings, other than the attic, are concrete. And he was on the other side of a concrete wall from this aircraft fuselage that came through as a molten jet coming through that building right there. And so he's the person that was closest to the impact point. And he's an amazing guy. So we honor him and his wife, Mel. He's a state senator in Texas now. I believe he's still in office over there and does great work. But man, what do you think about this, David? We're going to show us several more clips during the show here and talk about it some more. But let's start with the people in our streets that are Americans, without going into what groups they're in as far as like race or religion and all that, or even age, really. And I said young people in the opening, but there are older people that are buying into this stuff too. They're actually celebrating these Islamist terrorists and their wins. And this last one, I mean, it made 9/11's war crime look like child's play. This October 7th piece that they're out there supporting these days. What is going on?
Well, you know, as tragic as 9/11 was, of course, it was nothing as serious as January 6th, according to Vice President Kamala Harris at the debate last night. No, you know, I think what's happened is, whether it's the radical trans activist movement, whether it's this free Palestine, pro-terror, Osama bin Laden wasn't a bad guy movement, it's really just rebellion and anger and rage fueled by the left. The left has been telling kids from elementary school all the way through academia that America's this evil country. And, you know, when you convince people and you indoctrinate people with an America-hating ideology, of course, they're going to go and start sympathizing with people who hate America, because the left has normalized hating America. It's not the left versus the right. It's the left versus America. Our founding fathers are racist, and they discredit their reputation. The Constitution is archaic, and it needs to be every foundational element of our republic. They destroy. They tear down our monuments. They have their followers tear down our monuments. You saw it most recently in D.C. at the last Palestine protest. I mean, really, what the left is doing is they're creating a generation of people who have no respect for our country. So, of course, they're going to take to the streets and support the enemies of America and our allies. I mean, what else would you expect from people radicalized in a communist Marxist agenda and set out on the streets to destroy this country?
Yeah, and just to put it in the context of time, it's 23 years from the event on 9/11. So these kids, the young ones that are college students, they're anywhere from 18 to 21 years old, if my math serves
Give or take
right.
how long the senior year takes. Yes.
Yeah. So they weren't even born on 9/11, and they've been indoctrinated with this stuff. One of the questions that I have, though, I want to get your thoughts on this. Nice play on the Kamala thing with January 6th. We'll get back into that because it was the debate last night. We have to talk about it.
Yeah, crazy, right? I thought that's what we were coming to talk. Then I realized last night at 3 a.m. when I wrapped this space, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 9/11.
Well, this is kind of related. This question is kind of related to that, to the January 6th thing. Is now these kids have grown up in an environment not only of Marxist indoctrination, but also of learning that their own government is not being truthful with the American people and is involved in things that weren't heretofore known to the public. So they've also grown up in that environment. Then you're talking about January 6th. I mean, some people say it was a complete plan of the federal government. I'm kind of it was a target of opportunity for some government actors, a lot of government actors that came together because they had been meeting about it and led by Nancy Pelosi, quite frankly, and have turned the narrative into something that started out as a demonstration, protest, became a riot due to things beyond everybody's control except the police officers that were involved, quite frankly. So I'm kind of there because it is false. People are falsely imprisoned. Judges are saying things that are false to people they're sentencing to decades in prison for their political beliefs, for exercising their rights. So these kids have all grown up in that, and they see this. So do you think that's part of it too? Is that, hey, we can't trust our government. For all we know, they did do 9/11, and it's not really the Islamist terrorists that oppress women, that are into all of these crazy medieval styles of life.
What a question. I mean, I think we could talk for 2 hours on that question, but I'll be brief. So I think there's a combination of things. I think, man, the trust of the government thing, going back to January 6th and the people being imprisoned under phony charges, and even after the Supreme Court said you can't put him in jail for those charges, and then having Merrick Garland go, that's okay, I'll do a superseding indictment and put him back in jail for that same charge. I mean, there is a lot of things going on, and we still don't know who shot. What went into President Trump's attempted assassination? Yeah, it's a lone gunman who just managed to take a rifle onto an unguarded roof 180 yards from where the president was speaking, who had a clear shot. I mean, there is a lot of reason under this administration, the Harris-Biden administration, of government overreach. We've seen the lawfare. We've seen President Trump indicted in several places. We've seen the civil judgments against him totally fraudulent in some instances with no basis in law. So, yeah, it's healthy, actually, at this point to go, wait a second. I'm not sure I'm buying the mainstream narrative here coming out of our government, especially every time they talk about inflation and then they adjust it downward after the reports. So, but I think there's a difference between not trusting, or at least trust but verify, or questioning everything that's being told to us, whether it be through the media or the media through the government, but suspending your patriotism, though, and assuming that somehow 9/11 was an inside job and the United States did this to ourselves in order to go into war. It's a bit of a stretch. Now, as far as the people who don't know 9/11 and end up in the place they're in, and feel a certain way, whether the terrorists aren't bad guys or they don't know any better, it's really just a matter of education. Because where we are right now in a society is that the news is fake. They don't give you the real information. The language they use is carefully curated to make you think or have sympathy for the terrorists, and make you believe somehow that what they did wasn't as bad and their cause is justified. And then they talk about the genocide, Israel's genocide in Gaza. And so they just get a lot of bad information, and the fake news is lying to them every single day. Their professors are lying to them every single day. And a lot of these people come from homes where their parents lie to them every single day. So it doesn't surprise me that they're picking the enemy. And especially my favorite group are like the gays for Palestine or the gays for Gaza, who will literally, if they went on vacation there with their pride flags protesting naked like they do in New York City in front of children, they'd be thrown off a roof. I mean, they really just have no idea. But there are people that are questioning all of the narrative. They question what the news tells them. And I don't think it's the majority of young people. I think there's a minority of young people who go out there and they think this is the new punk rock to support terror. And I really think that's at the base of all of this.
Yeah, and we're going to see, we got to take a break here, David, but in the clip coming back in, you're going to see some words from these people that tells me that it's not all fun and games from these protesters, at least some of them that have infiltrated these marches are very serious, deadly serious, as a matter of fact. We're talking with David Pollock of the David Pollock Show here on Whistleblower Wednesday on the Rob Maness Show on World YouTube. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday here. We're talking 9/11 being 23 years, a long time ago, in the context of what you just saw and heard there, Americans marching in the streets supporting the Islamist terrorists, even though they've done even a more horrific set of atrocities on October 7th, 2023. And my guest today is David Pollock, host of the David Pollock Show, and my friend David. There's some things there in that little video that I want to talk about. The first is that young woman, I don't believe, is a college student. I think that these crowds are being directed and infiltrated by outside actors. Do you think that, or is it an organic university level type of
totally organic? It's just people just randomly upset about things they have no idea about. No, I mean, you've seen the guy in the mask behind him, right? Why the masks? These aren't college students. They're Antifa. They're anti-American. It's really the same group. It's really the Antifa group. They've been around, infiltrated the Black Lives Matter movement, whatever that was. They've all the women's rights marches, the anti-Trump marches in Washington, D.C., the World Economic Forums. You've seen this in Europe for a long time, the burning of the police cars and all that. And then it came to the United States, and really it started in places like Washington and Oregon, where the same quote-unquote anti-fascist fascists, they came to this country and they gave disenfranchised youth basically an outlet, and they did it under this cause of Antifa. They're a domestic terrorist group. They infiltrate all of these organizations, and they just find whatever cause they think they can assign people to. Now, unfortunately, you have some opportunistic politicians who see these movements as somehow beneficial to their own causes. Like you have, the Hamas caucus in Washington, D.C., and Rashida Tlaib and folks talking about river to the sea. So when you have Congress people in government giving support and encouragement to domestic terrorist groups, essentially, and then they infiltrate these colleges' campuses where the university professors are inspiring their students, probably giving them extra credit to show up to some of these marches, and then they go and speak on causes that they don't even understand. Really, I think that's what's at the heart of all of this. It's a radical Marxist element bent on destroying the United States. It doesn't matter what the cause is. It's this year's is terrorists. Last year, it's trans people. The year before that is Black Lives Matters. Fill in the blank. I mean, they just go on Amazon, they buy those little things they wear on their shoulders, and they read their script and try to get people upset. I really think that's more of the issue than a free Palestine, which none of these people even understand the history of Palestine or what Palestine is. It doesn't matter. They're just bored college students, and then they're gone and financed and motivated by outside antagonizers, part of who make up domestic terrorist organizations. And if the United States government would go and investigate the pallets of bricks that are placed in U.S. cities on street corners before these quote unquote peaceful protests, instead of barging in the doors of old ladies at 3 o'clock in the morning with SWAT gear, maybe we'd get to the bottom of who's really responsible for these organizations inspiring this violence on college campuses, because it will get out of control. The left can't control this, and we've already seen instances of this, and they're playing with fire over here, and they think it's somehow benefiting them in the upcoming election.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You know, the elements of Marxism, here's a couple for you. She goes on to say that Palestinians have a right to resist colonial occupation by any means necessary. Talk about not knowing the history of this conflict or the history before the conflict. That colonialism is an element of Marxist indoctrination, anti-colonialism. And the fact that she's trying to say that the Jewish people establishing a homeland called Israel, which has been known for thousands of years, are colonizers? Give me a break.
Yeah, well, they don't know. They hear it. It's like that misogyny. Like every liberal white female I talk to, oh, misogyny, that's misogyny. They don't know. They just hear these words and they walk around and they just use them because it makes them gaslighting. If I swear, I mean, if I would have had gaslighting on my bingo card last night, it would have filled up my card very quickly. Those terms, like you hear, they don't know what they're talking about. They really don't. And if like you watch those Turning Point events, or when Shapiro goes to the college campuses for like the gender stuff, they just have their talking points. And then as soon as they're asking a question, they melt down, they freak out, and then they start chanting. They always go to chanting when they run out of talking points, and it happens very quickly, by the way.
Yeah, it does. It does happen very quickly. Well, we've got a question in the live audience over in Spaces,
Sure.
So let's go over to Shell, the host over there, who you know very well, and take that hand.
Hi, David.
Hey,
We
Chad.
have.
Hey, Colonel. Hi, David. Thank you. So the whole thing of 9/11 is never forget, but it's become 23 years later, when politically expedient. Can I get from both of you a short list of the biggest indicators of how our government has forgotten?
I love.
Go
that
ahead,
question.
David, you
Can I
first.
take a shot at it. You
Yeah.
saw this morning, by the way, and I have it on my time, whatever you call my page on X, my timeline or whatever. I'm from like the MySpace generation, so I don't even know what you call it anymore. But you saw this morning when Kamala and Biden was standing there with Schumer and Trump and Vance, and the crowd's chanting, "We love you, Trump!" And you have Kamala going, like, nobody's waving at you, Kamala. but last 9/11. Where was Joe Biden? He was in Alaska. And what did they do to commemorate the 22nd anniversary of 9/11? They sent $6 billion to the largest state sponsor of terror, Iran. And what do you think they did with that $6 million over the last 12 months? Well, we saw what happened in Israel. We see what's happening in Yemen and the axis of terror throughout the region. Iran remains the biggest sponsor of terror in the region. And who's financing that? But Joe Biden, thanks to his 9/11 gift and hostage exchange. So look at this year, we have an election, right? Kamala Harris all of a sudden and Joe Biden decide, yeah, let's show up at these 9/11 sites and act like we give a damn. If they gave a damn, they would do something to stop the state sponsor of terror from Iran. But they don't. They're all talk. They do everything they can to support terrorism and not fight terrorism. The only person who's ever actually fought back against terrorism and actually defeated ISIS quickly was Donald Trump. And that's why they love him at ground zero, not because he shows up only when it's politically expedient. He shows up because he actually cares. That's his city. He's a New Yorker. That day affected him personally. Meanwhile, you have Kamala and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer standing there like anybody actually even wants him there. They don't. That's why they didn't go last year, and they weren't happy to see him this year. Hopefully that answers your question. Great question.
That is a great question. I'll take a stab at it. Here's the number one way you can see that they forgot, and it goes back to Kamala and Joe Biden, too. When they are pressuring the government of Israel to come to a ceasefire before they have eliminated Hamas, or cause them to unconditionally surrender, and they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth saying, oh, we unequivocally support Israel's right to exist and self-defense, but at the same time want to have the existence of Hamas and Hezbollah and the PIJ and all of those organizations that are military forces of Iran that David just mentioned we gave the billions and billions of dollars to as a freebie, a gift, so they can arm the Houthis and arm the Hamas and continue to arm Hezbollah and shoot missiles and drones at our troops through their militias in Iraq that we spent a lot of blood and treasure on, and kill them like the 3 soldiers that died not that long ago, even though Joe Biden denies it. That is the biggest indicator right there. Every day when Kamala does that and speaks out of both sides of her mouth, that's it. She does not recognize the danger of these Nazis and how that could overtake an entire region that could throw this entire world back into a world war over this dangerous ideology that's all wrapped up in Marxism and fascism in a way that many of the American people can't recognize, and they need to be educated on it. Did I capture that well, David?
I think you're spot on. I mean, and you look at the rapid withdrawal from Afghanistan. 13 service members die. Kamala goes out there and pretends somehow she gives a damn. And then the families, you've seen this all over X, the families of those service members are like, no, you haven't. This is your fault. It was the way you pulled out of Afghanistan that caused the death of my loved one. And then last night at the debate, Kamala Harris has the, I don't know the right word I want to use here, but it's not the word I want to say on your show, but goes and says somehow, celebrates the withdrawal of Afghanistan and says, oh, yeah, that was Trump's timeline. He was meeting with Taliban leaders and he scheduled the time to pull out. Yet Joe Biden's president, he has no plan in place for actually the evacuation, caused one of the biggest crises we've ever seen. People falling from airplanes. You have service members being killed. And again, they can never take responsibility for any of their failures. And so, yeah, I think they've forgotten. And as a matter of fact, they didn't forget, actually, Colonel. They didn't forget. They just don't care. That's the difference. They didn't forget. They know exactly what they're supposed to remember. They just don't care. Donald Trump cares, and their lies aren't going to convince people otherwise.
And he scares them because they don't care. And he scares them because they know that he has the ability to make the right decision, to do the right thing, even when the bureaucrats in the government and the military officers are giving him bad advice. He still has the right instincts, David. And I think you're right. He's going to do what he sees as necessary to end these conflicts before he does anything else. And when we come back, though, we face a new brutality from Hamas over the hostages. I want to show a little clip about that and continue this discussion and talk about Kamala and the debate last night and what we think she thinks her biggest vulnerabilities are, because it was very telling what we saw last night. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show with David Pollack. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking 9/11 and Americans supporting Islamist terrorists today.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
With the chilling murders of 6 Israeli hostages, Hamas has opened a new chapter in an already brutal war that is nearing a year. Hamas has reportedly instructed its militants who are guarding Israeli hostages in buildings and tunnels of Gaza to kill them if Israeli troops close in. This decision has been made as Israel focuses on freeing the captives through a military operation rather than negotiations. Harsh Goldberg-Polin, Eden Yerushalmi, Carmel Gat, Almog Sarusi, Alexander Labanov, and Ori Danino were among the 250 hostages kidnapped by Hamas during their deadly October 7 attack on Israel. The IDF recovered all 6 bodies in a tunnel under the southern Gaza city of Rafah. They were shot at close range before Israeli forces could reach them.
אם חס ושלום פגמנו איזה דבר בטהרה.
When the funerals of the hostages were taking place, Hamas released videos of what it described as the final messages of 2 hostages. 24-year-old Eden Yerushalmi and 25-year-old Ori Danino. The families of the slain hostages have described Hamas's new tactic as psychological terror.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's on World View Tube and X-Spaces simulcast. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and today is 9/11. It's a somber day in American and world history and should be remembered. But also, the Benghazi 9/11 day should be remembered, when America failed 4 Americans serving their country at the hands of people that support Kamala Harris. One Hillary Clinton. So we should always remember that. And in the context of today and what you just saw and heard there, one of those 6 hostages was an American citizen. And my guest today is David Pollack. And David, I just want to continue this conversation about this administration and Kamala Harris's culpability and responsibility to be held accountable. How many people do you think even know what the 6 or 7, I think it's 6 American hostages' names are? I was a young adult just joining the military during the hostage crisis with Iran in the late 70s. And we knew every day a new name and picture was put up and videos of them being captured and paraded around. Every single day for 444 days, the once vaunted news media in America was covering it and making it known who these great Americans were. And I'll be honest with you, I can't tell you one name except for the young man that was executed here, Hirsch. And that's on the President of the United States and Vice President of the United States for not acting responsibly on this. They don't want the American people to be knowledgeable enough to say, you need to do something, because they don't really want to do something. And you saw that last night in the debate, right?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the 6 hostages that were killed. Joe Biden was trying to, quote unquote, negotiate a ceasefire. If Hamas respected Joe Biden or his administration at all, do you think they would murder 6 people on the eve of ceasefire talks? Why in the world would you have a ceasefire with people that are still murdering hostages, and one being an American citizen? And then Joe Biden comes out, and rather than say anything condemning it, he talks about how important it is for us to have a ceasefire. It is the definition of weakness. And it shows you how little they respect Joe Biden. When Donald Trump is reelected, that conflict will end within 24 hours. Because Donald Trump, if you would have killed an American citizen during, and first of all, there wouldn't be any ceasefire talks. There would be surrender talks. There would be terms of the surrender. That would be the only conversation we'd be having with the terrorists in Gaza. But if Donald Trump was president and they killed an American citizen, what do you think Donald Trump would do? Have talks with them? No. You think Israel's is being accused of brutality because of their operation in Gaza? You would see what Donald Trump would do with the U.S. military. There would be no more Gaza. That is how you fight terrorists. You don't negotiate with them. They're not trying to make peace. Do we need to remind people that in October of last year, they crossed the Israeli border, went through neighborhoods, ripped people from their cars and their homes, murdered them, their children, the women, the men. They went to that concert, and as people cowered in bunkers, they threw grenades in there. They assaulted the women. They kidnapped them, dragged them over to Gaza. They held them in horrible conditions as hostages, and then murdered them when they're trying to negotiate a ceasefire. This isn't a group of people you negotiate with. It's a group of people you eliminate. And on 9/11, there is no greater reminder of the significance of being weak on terror than what happened in this country 23 years ago.
Oh, you're absolutely right. You know, Hirsch, he even had to have his arm amputated because of the wounds that he received while he was a hostage. And then they shoot him in the back of the head because the IDF got close to where they were at, I think, on a rescue operation, although I don't believe that's been publicly acknowledged that it was actually a rescue operation. But they were close, within 10 minutes of this location. And Hamas has given orders that if there is another operation by the IDF that's close to where any hostages are being taken, to shoot them in the head. That's beyond a war crime. Why don't we see the vaunted globalist institutions going after these people for these crimes against humanity?
Because they hate America and any of our allies. And this is an opportunity for the United Nations and the so-called people that are supposed to be working as our allies, even though we give them way too much money. I think the United Nations is probably useless at this point. We should kick them out of the United States. They don't care. They don't like Israel. They don't like Jewish people. This isn't a secret. Nazis never went anywhere. They just went into government. It's not like we defeated Hitler and all of a sudden Nazis disappeared off the planet. No, they went into our institutions. They went into the United Nations and all these globalist organizations. And of course they don't care. They support these terrorist groups. And evidence of that is exactly what you just said. These people are committing war crimes and murdering innocent civilians, and they're condemning Israel and calling for a ceasefire. I mean, I don't know what more needs to be said.
It's so, if it wasn't deadly serious, it'd be laughable. I would be laughing about it all the time, Well, we've got questions over the audience. Let's go ahead and take some. Shell, go ahead.
We have B.P. Murray, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I would just think on the debate, as far as foreign affairs are concerned, it's a no contest. I think most people would agree. Trump is just way better at negotiating and way better at solving problems overseas. I think that's one of the things he did best. I mean, he did a lot of great things, but certainly that. And Kamala Harris didn't talk about ending the Ukraine war. She just bragged about arming or funding the war. We got all these things. We did all these things for Ukraine. That's all she did. And Trump talked about ending it. And they tried to bait him
Do you have a
into
question
it.
for the Colonel and his guest, sir?
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess, do you agree that that was handled well by Trump in the debate?
I'm picking up what you're laying down. Look, Kamala doesn't. If only we had some way to know. If only there was some way for us to know what kind of president Kamala Harris would be. If only we had a record of some sort to compare what she says she's going to do in her plans, compare it to some sort of record of it. Wait a second, she's vice president of the United States. Wait a second. We can look over the last 3.5 years to see what the Harris-Biden administration produced. It produced a Russian incursion into Ukraine. It produced terrorist attacks into Israel. It produced weaponization of regions that we haven't seen conflict on in years. The world is a less dangerous place. The United States has a wide open border with more terrorists in the United States than before 9/11. Think about that. We talk about here in the 23rd anniversary of 9/11, and there are more terrorists in the country today than there was before 9/11. Who's responsible for that? Well, I guess it's not the lady who's the border czar or the vice president of the United States. So she sits up there on the debate stage and talks about her plan. But Donald Trump so perfectly goes, she has plans, of course. She has plans to destroy this country, and she does. No, she can't beat Donald Trump on foreign affairs. Of course not. Look at her record. She has a record. And I love this whole when I'm president, I don't know what's more annoying, her noise, her voice, or her lies. But she sits back there and acts like something's going to be different. Nothing's going to be different. The same people that are running the country now, because we know it's not Joe Biden, he's on the beach, are going to be running the country when Kamala Harris is president. And you know what? There'll be nothing different. There'll be foreign wars that benefit these donors and the military-industrial complex. No, she'll never beat Donald Trump on foreign affairs because she's not for peace. She's for profits. And Donald Trump actually wants peace. And that's what putting America first looks like. Colonel.
Yeah. I mean, what you saw on the stage last night was Donald Trump, the representative of the interests of the American people, okay? The interests of the American people, from whom the power of the United States government and all forms of government in this country, from their consent, that power is supposed to flow. And I think he recognizes that and acknowledges it. I mean, he's not perfect, but he still recognizes that. And then Kamala Harris, who's a representative of the statists that are actually running the country, the so-called elite expert class that thinks they know better than all of the American citizens, and especially Donald J. Trump. And that's why they're doing everything they can to prevent him from getting into power again, to prevent us from regaining our power so that we can, through him and his team, take the actions to reset this country back to a republic the way it was designed by the founders, because that's got to be the goal and the end state of any effort of this size. And the reason Kamala Harris made the answer that she did about Ukraine is because the statists and those that support her, she's their representative. And part of that statism is the military-industrial complex that is keeping her and Joe Biden in power, and they're keeping them well-funded, which turns into their profits, etc. That's why we went from Afghanistan really quickly back into an endless war and this proxy war against Russia, which is both ill-advised and against the vital national interests of the American people, which is what our military is supposed to be there to defend, our vital national interest, not Ukraine's. It's not in our vital interest to have a good understanding or control the border between Ukraine and Russia. That is a dispute between those two countries. And they have a right to self-defense. I'm all for, and called for Barack Obama to support them so that the Crimea incursion wouldn't occur, but he didn't, because he knew that too. He knew that too. We got to take another break, David. Come back for the last segment. We got one more hand up over the audience. We'll get to that. And we'll hear from Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu about what needs to be done with Hamas. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show on Worldview Tube and X Spaces simulcast.
We live in uncertain times. In fact, we live in a time when our own governments all over the world are warning us that there could be big problems with our power grid. World War III seems to be right on the horizon. Let me ask you this. Do you have a satellite phone? Should communications go down with cell towers? Do you have a satellite phone to get a hold of that college student or your spouse who travels, whatever it might be, to get a hold of your senior adult parents? We have satellite phones at worldviewtalk.com, and you get the satellite phone for free when you sign up for their very reasonable payment programs for the service. Sign up for the service with a reasonable contract, get the satellite phone for free. WorldviewTalk.com. You'll also find they have, well, what I now have, which is a solar generator. Yeah, I have a gas generator, an LP propane generator, but what if that goes down? I want to back up to my backup. So I now have a solar generator as well. You'll find them at worldviewtalk.com. Check it out today, worldviewtalk.com.
After the murder of the 6 hostages, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have been hitting the streets and demanding that Prime Minister Netanyahu's government strike a deal to free the remaining hostages. The protesters are blaming Netanyahu for sacrificing the lives of Israeli citizens to stay in power. The right-wing members of Netanyahu's coalition have threatened to bring down the government should he strike any deal with Hamas to end the war. Nearly 100 hostages are still believed to be in Hamas's captivity in the Gaza Strip. But Netanyahu is insisting that it should be Hamas that has to make the concessions, not Israel.
What has changed in the last 5 days? What has changed? One thing. These murderers executed 6 of our hostages. They shot them in the back of the head. That's what's changed. And now after this, we're asked to show seriousness? We're asked to make concessions? What message does this send Hamas? It says, kill more hostages, murder more hostages, you'll get more concessions. The pressure internationally must be directed at these killers, at Hamas, not at Israel.
What's unclear at this point is if these protests will compel Netanyahu to change Israel's approach to the war in Gaza. But what is clear is that the killing of the 6 hostages is a turning point. And many are asking whether Israel is reaching the limits of what its military campaign can achieve, and whether its offensive in Gaza is endangering the lives of hostages instead of bringing them back safely.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's 9/11. It's Whistleblower Wednesday here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. My guest is the host of the David Pollock Show, David Pollock himself. David, I wanted to show that clip there because I see an Israeli leader that's actually talking to Kamala Harris in that statement there. I mean, he's talking to the press and a small group, I think, in reality. But he's responding to the United States government, and he's basically telling them what I've been saying he should be telling them all along: unconditional surrender. It's Hamas that needs to give up, essentially, and Israel is not going to do it. Am I wrong there?
No, of course that there has to be unconditional surrender. Look, they attacked Israel. Israel has not said that Hamas can't exist or that the Palestine can't exist. It's not Israel saying from Middle Israel to the sea, from Eastern Israel to the river. It's the Palestinian people that have decided that Israel didn't have the right to exist, and it's their Iran and their proxies who are supporting them in their effort to eliminate Israel. So what does a ceasefire look like? Just taking a pause in the aggression from the Iran-supported terrorists in the region? No, there has to be the unconditional surrender. And Hamas is on their heels. There is barely anything left. The attacks on Israel now are really made up of Syrian elements from Hezbollah. I mean, they're having to bring in reinforcements. Really, we have to take the battle to where the battle belongs, and that's Iran. And until we address Iran's funding of terror, Israel will never be secure. I don't think Israel's philosophy of unconditional surrender is. I think that's what we call for. The ceasefire does nothing. That being said, when Bibi Netanyahu came to the United States, who greeted him when he came off the airplane? Not the Secretary of State. Not the president of the United States, not even the vice president of the United States. And it's Kamala Harris, by the way. She's vice president of the United States, even though she's not. So, and then when he went and spoke in front of a joint session of Congress, you had Rashida Tlaib holding a sign that said war criminal. Kamala Harris wasn't there either. Joe Biden wasn't there either. So when you see that public display of a lack of support for Israel, our closest ally in a very dangerous region, What do you expect? I mean, this is exactly what the Biden-Harris administration has delivered to that region, the instability and the peace that Donald Trump delivered.
Yeah, every time Kamala Harris says, "Oh no, we completely support Israel. We're never going to back off on that," I say what you just talked about. Always watch what a politician does. Don't listen to what they say, because that's the reality, man. We got one more question from the audience here before we get to the end of the show. Let's go ahead, go over to Shell and take that question.
We have Cookie, sir.
Cookie.
Good afternoon, Colonel. A very sincere thank you for all that you've done for this country, especially on this day 23 years ago. My question is, when and why has the media changed so much to where when Kamala is saying January 6th is the worst day since the Civil War? I mean, why are they allowing people to just make these stupid comments about things that aren't real? I'd just like to know why or how you think why it's changed so much.
It's a good question, dude.
I mean, it's rhetorical. The media isn't the media anymore. I mean, it's really just a mouthpiece, a propaganda press for the radical left. I mean, look, they bent over backwards, tying themselves in pretzels yesterday to argue against Donald Trump. I mean, it wasn't Kamala versus Trump. It was ABC versus Trump. And so the media doesn't actually ask questions anymore. It doesn't fact check Democrats. All it does is go out and try to promote the narratives that are sent by whoever is running the entire organizations, because whether it's local, they're all the same people. They get their talking points. You can go to every single news site. It says the same damn lies. I mean, and this is what we're talking about, Cookie. The media isn't the media. The only place you get real truth anymore is here on this platform X that you're in this space right now. Elon Musk buying X might have been, and we'll look back historically, might be the most significant thing that's ever happened in the interest of free speech and a free press. Because now there's accountability. They're not suppressing stories like the Hunter Biden laptop. They're actually giving you a narrative that's not set by the spinsters on ABC. Instead, you can go to X, which has more people watching, by the way, than any of these stupid nightly shows that nobody gives any credibility to anymore. And then we get to actually give you our opinions. Last night on this platform, there was a C-SPAN poll that showed that Donald Trump won the debate 70-30. If you would have put on MSNBC or ABC or any of those other communist propaganda machines, you would have been told that Kamala won the night. Donald Trump was flustered, easily fell for the bait, and nonsense. And then that's what people would have been talking about at the water coolers. But if you're on this platform like you are, and all the smart people listening in this space and listening to this show, you know that that's not the truth. Moderate voters, even voters who watches C-SPAN, not MAGA conservatives, right? So if C-SPAN is telling you that 70% of the people thought Trump won the debate, when undecided voters are telling Frank Luntz, who nobody thinks Frank Luntz likes Trump, regardless of what he says when it's opportunistic, when they tell you they thought Trump won, that's who won. So the media lies, Cookie, and you know that.
Yeah, and I think, was Luntz doing the Reuters focus group where you had the 10 undecided, 6 of them said Trump won, 2 said Kamala won, and 2 were still undecided after that. I mean, it's 6
I do my
and
best
10.
not to watch Luntz. Luntz has become Luntz has become the epitome of bad polling, right? Like when people go look at polls and go, there's a bias sample in the poll. You just go look at Frank Luntz, and then you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but you're I hate to agree with the guest so much, but you're absolutely right. And I'll just remind everybody, if you didn't catch the show on Worldview Tube last night that I was part of the panel on, analyzing the debate in real time and everything, go back and check out the recording. You can find it at worldviewtube.com, and Worldview Tube's on the Rumble stream live, and we'll be on Roku this Friday as an app, and the Amazon Fire a week from Friday as an app. And then in the ensuing weeks after that, we're going to have our own channel line, just like Real America's Voice, on the Roku channel lineup for live streaming. So if you want to find good, reliable, factual content, go to networks like that one, like Real America's Voice. Check out David Pollack's show, and do it on X, because we're not suppressed here. I'm suppressed on Facebook. I have double the amount of followers on Facebook. that I have here on X. And I'm lucky to reach 30 people with the live stream that goes over there at the same time that this show is airing. It's being live streamed over to Facebook to that account. And I can't get through to them because they have it so suppressed, man. It's fantastic that you were able to join me today, David. I thank you so much for the short notice hit. We appreciate you. Let's talk about where your show is at, what you're up to, and plans for the future before we close this show out, man.
Oh my gosh! Well, I could talk for an hour about where I'm heading. No, you guys can find my show at on X is our biggest platform. You just follow me there at David Pollock USA, David Pollock USA, and you will find my show on Monday nights, 8 p.m. Me and my puppet friend, patriotic puppet Carlson. He's been on this show before. He's a lot of fun for a conservative puppet. So Monday nights, 8 p.m. You can find me there, and we also simulcast in Spaces just like you do. And of course, I'm all over Spaces all the time. And if you give me that follow and you see that purple ring around my name, you know where I'm at. Last night I actually hosted a space with Mario Nawful. We had 1.2 million viewers last night, and so it was a lot of fun. So I look forward to seeing you guys on X. What a wonderful platform. And Colonel, thank you so much for having me on your show. You're a good friend, and I love having these conversations with you. This was a lot of fun. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Thanks a lot, my friend. A lot going on the next 58 days, and hopefully we'll run across each other in person sometime as we continue this fight to get Donald Trump elected to help restore this republic that the founders designed and replace this tyrannical government by the experts is what I've started calling it because that's what they think they are, and they don't think we know anything. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's it for today. And tomorrow's Truth Thursday. We'll have the great Mike Davis on of the Article 3 Project to talk about the lawfare, current status, his thoughts on Kamala's and Donald Trump's comments about those cases on the debate last night, and then what the future Trump administration's legal strategy should be to take on the people that have committed traitorous actions by conducting this unwarranted and illegal lawfare against American citizens over the last 4 years in the Biden administration. Until then, I'm Rob Maness on World YouTube and X Spaces Simulcast.